Right then, Red and White Army. If you thought these past few weeks at Bramall Lane had been intense enough, hold on to your hats because the last few hours have just detonated 3 absolute nuclear bombs over our beloved club that are going to leave every blade in complete and utter shock. But first, if you're proper blades and want to stay on top of everything happening with our Sheffield United, smash that like button right now and subscribe to the channel, because the content I'm delivering today is going to be absolutely unmissable. Hit the bell icon as well because in the coming days, we'll have loads more in-depth analysis about our club. Pay close attention, Blades. We're talking about revelations that go far beyond what any supporter could imagine. 3 situations that strike at the heart of our identity as Steel City. Issues ranging from devastating confessions from behind the scenes of our squad to direct and public attacks from rival managers, through to an injury situation that could completely define the course of our crucial clash tonight against Southampton. To give you a sense of what we're facing, our season started catastrophically, with 7 consecutive defeats that left us rock bottom of the championship with just 3 points secured. That's right, Red and White Army. 3 points from a possible 21. A success rate of just 14.3% that would make any blade lose sleep. But here's what makes everything even more dramatic. Last season, we reached the championship playoff final. We beat Bristol City by an incredible 6-0 on aggregate in the semi-finals, completely dominated that campaign with 92 points secured, and we're just 1 victory away from returning to the Premier League when we lost to Sunderland 2-1 in the final at Wembley. How is it that a team that was fighting for promotion just months ago now finds itself in last place in the table? How is it that players who contested a playoff final now can't even maintain basic physical conditioning? And how is it that our club, with all its centenary tradition, has become a laughingstock for rival managers? When was the last time you felt the club was genuinely facing such a deep and multifaceted crisis? Because today we have Chris Wilder back in charge. Yes, the same Chris Wilder who was sacked in June, replaced by Ruben Sells, who was also dismissed after 7 consecutive defeats, and has now returned to try to salvage a situation that seems completely out of control. 3 completely different and equally explosive situations are revolutionizing Sheffield United's backstage at this very moment, and each one could define not just our match today against Southampton at Bramall Lane, but literally the entire future of this championship season and our aspirations to one day return to the elite of English football. Are you prepared to discover the rawest and most painful truth about the current state of our blades? Because what I'm about to reveal will explain an awful lot about this nightmarish start to the season we're experiencing. Let's start with the news that's going to shatter the heart of every supporter who still keeps alive the hope of our return to the Premier League. Chris Wilder, our recently reappointed manager, has just made a public confession that is simultaneously brave and absolutely devastating. Our Sheffield United squad simply isn't physically fit enough to compete at the level that the championship demands. And when I say not fit enough, Red and White Army, I'm talking about a situation far more serious and systemic than you could imagine. This isn't a matter of a few players being slightly off the pace. We're looking at a complete collapse in physical preparation that finally explains why we started this season with 7 consecutive defeats that left us at the absolute bottom of the table. Wilder was brutally direct during his press conference. After analyzing the team's performance in detail during these catastrophic opening rounds, he discovered that several key players arrived at the club with serious physical conditioning deficiencies that compromise not just individual performance, but the entire tactical dynamic he intends to implement. To help you understand the real scale of this situation, Ben Mee, an experienced 35-year-old center-back who arrived as a free agent and should be one of the defensive leaders, spent the entire summer training alone, without any adequate professional supervision. Danny Ings, a 32-year-old striker with vast Premier League experience, also arrived in August after months training on his own, without the specific preparation that a player of his age and injury history requires. But the situation becomes even more worrying when we analyze cases like Tom Davies, a midfielder on loan from Everton, who should be a fundamental piece in midfield. His preseason was completely interrupted by an injury that kept him out of work during crucial weeks of preparation. Result? He still hasn't managed his first appearance of the season. And perhaps the most emblematic case is that of Chiedozie Ogbene, on loan from Ipswich Town. The Irish winger is still in the process of recovery and reconditioning. After suffering an Achilles tendon rupture in October last year, an extremely serious injury that can take up to a year for complete recovery. He came to Sheffield United not to be an immediate starter, but specifically to gradually improve his physical condition. Now imagine the tactical nightmare this represents for Chris Wilder. He needs to implement his characteristic style of play. Intense, physical, with high pressing and rapid transitions, using players who literally don't have the cardiovascular and muscular foundation necessary to sustain this intensity for 90 minutes. But here's the detail that should worry all of us most. Blades. Oliver Arblaster, one of our main academy prospects, a 20-year-old gem who represented hope for the future, will soon need to step away from the pitch to recover from an anterior cruciate ligament injury. This is an injury that typically requires 6 to 9 months of recovery, and in a young player can compromise entire career development. For a club with Sheffield United's historical aspirations, with our 137-year tradition and the pride of representing Sheffield, this revelation is absolutely devastating. We're talking about a manager of Chris Wilder's experience and competence. The same man who took us from League One straight to the Premier League in consecutive seasons, publicly admitting he doesn't have the basic physical tools to implement his game project. But let's look at the numbers that really matter and explain our current table position. In 7 matches played this season, we managed just 1 victory, 0 draws, and 6 defeats. We scored a pathetic 2 goals and conceded 13. A negative goal difference of 11 that is simply unacceptable for any professional club, let alone Sheffield United. Our defense, which should be commanded by Ben Mee, conceded an average of 1.86 goals per match. Our attack, which should count on Danny Ings' experience, managed a pathetic average of 0.29 goals per game. These numbers don't lie. We have technically capable players but physically incapable of executing for 90 minutes what they know how to do tactically. How do you think this completely explains our apocalyptic start to the season? Have we finally understood why our players always seem to step behind opponents, always arriving late to challenges, always losing the second ball, always conceding goals in the final minutes when physical fatigue speaks loudest? The situation is so critical that Wilder literally needs to restructure his tactical plans to compensate for these physical deficiencies. He can't implement the high pressing that characterizes his football because the players simply can't cope. He can't make the rapid positional switches that have always been his trademark because the athletes don't have the necessary cardiovascular endurance. And here's the cruelest irony of this entire situation. Ben Mee, at 35 and after a summer of inadequate preparation, only managed his first complete match against Oxford United last Saturday. Precisely in our first and only victory of the season. Coincidence? Absolutely not. It was the first time we had a center-back with minimally adequate conditioning commanding our defense. But the situation doesn't stop there, Red and White Army. And now we come to a part that's going to make every true Blade's blood boil with indignation. While we're dealing internally with these serious physical conditioning problems, a devastating and completely unnecessary external criticism has just exposed our club in a way that is simultaneously unfair and deeply disrespectful to our history and tradition. Will Still, Southampton's manager who will face us tonight at our sacred Bramall Lane, had the audacity and lack of class to call our recent administrative decisions completely ridiculous. And it wasn't just a passing comment. He dedicated a significant part of his press conference to directly attacking our way of running the club. "Honestly, I think it's completely ridiculous," said Still, with an arrogance that frankly doesn't match Southampton's own situation. He was referring specifically to the fact we dismissed and rehired Chris Wilder within a few months, as if a rival manager had any moral authority or internal knowledge to comment on another club's complex administrative decisions. But things get even more revolting when we analyze the complete context of these statements. Still had the petulance to use our club as an example of what he considers wrong with modern football, saying, "Unfortunately, that's how football works nowadays." As if Sheffield United, with 137 years of history, were responsible for the structural problems of contemporary football. To completely contextualize this situation and show the hypocrisy of this criticism, Chris Wilder was dismissed in June after a season where, admittedly, he didn't achieve direct promotion to the Premier League, but took us to the playoff final where we lost to Sunderland. Ruben Selles was hired to implement a new playing philosophy, but after 7 consecutive defeats, including a 5-0 humiliation to Ipswich Town, it became clear the change wasn't working. Sheffield United's board, demonstrating courage and pragmatism, quickly recognized the error and brought back Chris Wilder just 2 weeks ago. And what was the immediate result? Our first victory of the season against Oxford United, with a performance that showed clear signs of improvement both tactically and mentally. Now look at the supreme irony of this situation. Will Still, who's criticizing our decisions, has a record of just 1 victory in his first 7 championship matches in charge of Southampton. His team also has serious problems, is also below expectations, but he has the audacity to position himself as an example of stability and planning. What's most deeply troubling about this whole story is the condescending and paternalistic way Still refers to Chris Wilder. Chris would have been very disappointed if he'd received that news at the end of last season. He didn't deserve any of that. The situation reversed and he was right, bringing him back. Look at the lack of class in that statement. As if Will Still, who doesn't even know Chris Wilder personally, had the moral authority to opine on what our manager deserved or didn't deserve. As if he knew better than our board, our supporters, and Wilder himself what's best for Sheffield United. And here's the part that should embarrass Still if he had a minimum of self-criticism. He continued saying, "And I'm not a statistics guy, but if you look at all the statistics, they show we're doing something right. We're just not managing to make it work. But that takes time." Translating that sentence, Still is basically admitting his own team isn't working, that he needs time to implement his ideas, but simultaneously criticizes Sheffield United for giving Ruben Selles time, and then making the decision to change when it became clear it wasn't working. The timing of these statements couldn't be more inappropriate and strategically misguided. We're talking about comments made literally on the eve of the direct confrontation between our clubs, at our first opportunity for Chris Wilder to secure his first home victory since returning to command at Bramall Lane. It's the type of statement that should serve as pure fuel for our players. Imagine arriving home tonight, in front of our faithful support who turned up over 30,000 strong even during our losing streak, with the opportunity to shut up a rival manager who had the audacity to disrespect us publicly. And let's talk about the reality of facts. Southampton were relegated from the Premier League last season just like us. The difference is they had a disastrous season and went down directly, while we fought until the end, reached the playoffs, and lost the final by fine margins. Who has more moral authority to talk about management and planning? Will Still might be right when he says, there are examples of clubs that were patient, gave people a bit of time with confidence and faith, but he conveniently forgets. There are also examples of clubs that quickly recognized when something wasn't working and had the courage to make necessary changes. We are Sheffield United, Red and White Army, a centenary club with a steel tradition forged in Sheffield's foundries, with a history of overcoming that few clubs in the world can match. We don't need management or football lessons from a manager who's facing the same problems as us, but has the petulance to position himself as an example. What do you think of this completely unnecessary external interference? Is Still trying to create psychological pressure before the match, trying to destabilize our environment? Or does he really have the arrogance to believe his opinions about our club have any relevance? Now, Red and White Army, let's move to news that could completely transform our perspective, not just for today's match against Southampton, but potentially for our entire trajectory this season. Chris Wilder has revealed a situation that, despite being initially worrying and frustrating, could end up being exactly the golden opportunity our Blades needed to begin the definitive turnaround in this championship. The situation involves Tahith Chong, and for you to completely understand the importance of what I'm about to explain, we need to talk about who this player really is and what his presence or absence could mean tactically for our team. Tahith Chong wasn't just named in the squad for last Saturday's match against Oxford United. He was set to start. Chris Wilder had already completely defined the specific tactical position where the Dutch winger would operate, a position he already masters perfectly from his time playing in the Premier League for Luton Town. But then something happened that initially seemed like a catastrophe. During the pre-match warm-up, Chong's knee simply locked up, in Chris Wilder's own words. A sudden and unexpected medical situation that took our manager away from all his elaborate tactical plans for that specific match. "That was disappointing for Chongy," said Wilder, revealing the frustration of both player and coaching staff. He was set to start and had trained really well. In the position we'd planned for him, he'd played before in the Premier League, with Luton Town, and his knee just locked up during the warm-up, so it wasn't an ideal situation. Now here comes the absolutely exciting part of this story. Chong isn't just any player, Red and White Army. We're talking about an athlete with a European CV of the highest level, with solid and proven Premier League experience, who's already played in continental competitions and could be exactly the differential we need to turn things around this season. Let's look at the concrete facts about this player's pedigree. Tahith Chong has substantial Premier League experience, not just with Luton Town, but also with Manchester United, where he was developed and had opportunities in the first team. He's already played a match in the UEFA Champions League, the most prestigious club competition in world football, and started in 2 Europa League matches. For a championship where every technical detail, every individual play, every moment of superior quality can make the difference between winning and losing crucial points. Having a player with this level of international experience available is simply transformational. But let's analyze the deeper tactical aspect of this situation. Chris Wilder wasn't just testing Chong against Oxford United. He had studied the player's characteristics in detail, identified exactly how his abilities would fit into the game system he intends to implement, and had already defined the specific position where Chong would be most effective. "In the position we'd planned for him, he'd played before in the Premier League," said Wilder. This isn't coincidence. It's meticulous tactical planning. Wilder is taking advantage of Chong's previous high-level experience to place him exactly where he can perform to maximum potential from the first minute. And now we come to the moment of suspense that could define tonight's confrontation. Will Chong be available to face Southampton? Wilder purposefully maintains the mystery. We'll wait and see if Chong will be in condition. It's exactly this type of tactical uncertainty that could catch our opponents completely by surprise. Imagine the situation from Southampton's perspective. Will still prepared his team studying our side based on the formation we used against Oxford United. Without Chong, he developed his defensive strategies, defined his marking, organized his tactical system considering the players who actually took the field last Saturday. But if Chong is available tonight, it represents a completely new tactical variable that still didn't have the opportunity to study live. It's like having a card up your sleeve that the opponent doesn't even know exists. And here's confirmation that this possibility is leaving even Southampton supporters genuinely worried. The Saints' own specialist website, Saints Marching, openly admitted that the Saints would prefer not to play against him if they had a choice. This isn't just recognition of Chong's individual quality. It's admission that his presence on the pitch would fundamentally change the game's dynamics in Sheffield United's favor. It's recognition that he represents a real and significant threat to Southampton's aspirations. But let's go beyond the individual tactical aspect and analyze what this represents symbolically. While Will still publicly criticizes our backstage decisions, Chris Wilder might have exactly up his sleeve a Premier League-level player that Southampton's manager wasn't expecting to face. It's the perfect response to external criticism. Not with words, but with quality football. Not with justifications, but with concrete tactical solutions. Not with promises, but with players who can make the difference in practice. This situation perfectly represents what Chris Wilder has always done best throughout his career. Transform uncertainties into tactical opportunities, convert problems into creative solutions, and maximize the potential of differentiated players even in adverse circumstances. Even with all the physical problems we've discussed in the squad, even with all the external criticism we're facing, Wilder manages to identify and prepare elements that could be decisive. That's why he's a respected manager. That's why he was rehired. And that's why he could be the right man to get us out of this situation. Do you think this possible return of Chong could be exactly the surprise factor we need, not just to beat Southampton, but to definitively shut up Will Still and show that Sheffield United knows very well what it's doing? Red and White Army, we've reached the end of this in-depth analysis. And what we've witnessed today is literally a complete, honest, and multifaceted portrait of our Sheffield United's current reality. We have serious and systemic physical problems in the squad that explain our catastrophic start to the season. We have unfair and disrespectful external criticism, trying to destabilize our confidence and unity. But we also have real and concrete opportunities to show all our strength and quality. Chris Wilder's genius has always been exactly this: transforming adversities into fuel for great historical achievements. He's already proved this unquestionably when he took us from League One straight to the Premier League in consecutive seasons, creating one of the most beautiful stories in recent English football. And now he's doing exactly the same thing. Being brutally honest about our current physical limitations, but simultaneously preparing intelligent and creative tactical solutions. The Southampton manager's criticism actually exposes much more the desperation of someone who knows he's going to face a genuinely motivated Chris Wilder at our sacred Bramall Lane than any real problem in our management. Still can call our decisions ridiculous as much as he wants, but he conveniently forgets we're talking about the manager who knows every stone of this historic stadium and every fiber of the Blade's soul. And whilst we honestly deal with temporary conditioning problems, we also have the concrete possibility of counting on players of Tahith Chong's exceptional caliber, athletes with international experience who can make decisive differences in crucial moments like this direct confrontation against Southampton. What moves me most in this entire situation is seeing how our support continues turning up in impressive numbers even during our worst phase. More than 30,000 Blades were at Bramall Lane last week to support a team that had lost 6 consecutive matches. That's unconditional love. That's steel tradition. That's what makes Sheffield United a truly special club. 6 months from now, when we're seriously fighting for promotion to the Premier League, and we will be, you can be absolutely certain of that, we'll remember this exact moment as the definitive turning point of our season. Not because we denied our problems or pretended everything was fine, but because Chris Wilder taught us that transparency, determination, and hard work are always the solid foundation for rebuilding our historical greatness. Bramall Lane will be our impenetrable fortress tonight, and every Blade present in the stadium will witness live our definitive response to all criticism, adversities, and doubts. Southampton will discover why you should never underestimate a team from Sheffield, especially when that team is called Sheffield United. If you're Red and White Army heart and soul, subscribe to the channel right now. Smash that like if you haven't already and hit the bell, because in the coming days I'll bring all the detailed post-match analysis, the next moves that will define our season, and loads more exclusive content about our Blades. Which of these 3 situations impacts you most as passionate supporters? Comment below with your opinions, expectations, and feelings. And let's keep this conversation alive and vibrant. Blades forever until death.